Hola amigos, hoy en Compás Uno tenemos una entrevista muy especial con Ignazio Vagnone, especialista en audio de Jensen Speaker, la legendaria marca de parlantes que hizo historia en el audio y que hoy se fabrica en Italia. Este es el primero de una serie de capítulos donde vamos a hablar con Ignazio sobre audio, historia y tecnología. Para arrancar, Ignazio, quería preguntarte un poquito sobre la historia de Jensen, cuál es la herencia que nos deja Jensen en el audio y cómo volvió a renacer de la mano de ustedes.
The concept of the dynamic loudspeaker as we know it, so a membrane pushed by a voice coil and driven by a magnet, is a concept that has been invented by a team of engineers led by Peter Jensen in the very early years of the 1900s. Peter Jensen is one of the inventors of the dynamic speaker as we know it. So whoever is going to be listening to this show will be listening through maybe studio monitors or headphones, and they will be using a dynamic loudspeaker to hear what we are discussing. So that is the heritage of Jensen. So Jensen developed the first dynamic loudspeaker and made the first public demonstration of an amplified human voice in 1915 in the San Francisco Park near the Golden Gate Bridge. This was kind of the start, the official revelation to the public of what an amplified human voice is. Since then, Peter Jensen founded his company and started manufacturing loudspeaker mostly for public address applications. So, loudspeakers for railway stations other than hospitals, or let's say this kind of non-music related application. But then, there was a newborn industry, which was the radio industry, and the first, let's say, hi-fi industry, even if calling them high fidelity was probably a little bit too generous with the eyes of today. So he started also developing speakers for the radio business and for the gramophone industries. Then in the late 40s, a gentleman from Fullerton, California, Mr. Leo Fender, basically invented the market of the amplification for instruments. And his circuits were originally based on radio circuits. But, he was a very creative guy, so he adapted the circuits to the demands of the musicians that were playing in the country and western band and in the jazz swing orchestra bands, in order to bring the sound of the electric guitar at the same sound pressure level of much louder instruments like, horn sections or violins, fiddles. So in order to have the guitar on a different level. So that's how the whole thing started. And Jensen was one of the biggest speaker manufacturer in the industry. So it was, let's say, quite natural for Fender to join forces with Jensen. And after Jensen, then came other brands like Magneton, which is an historic brand that has always used Jensen in his amplifiers. And then others like Ampeg, Gibson, Epiphone, and all the, how we call them, the Chicago Boys, which is the big Valco group, which means the Valco amplifiers, the Silvertone amplifiers. Those were, let's say, entry-level, lower price products that they were actually sold on catalogs. They were not sold in shops. They were sold only through postal catalogs. And they were the typical instrument of the beginners and of the schools. So they also were using Jensen, also because the factory was in Chicago and the Valco company was in the same area. So it made a lot of sense. But, you know, keeping the focus on Fender, they used primarily, not exclusively, but primarily Jensen up until the mid of the 60s. Then when Leo Fender sold the company to CBS in 1965, Jensen made a very strange decision. And the decision was, oh, if we don't have Fender anymore, because CBS had different suppliers, if we don't have Fender, we are not really interested in the music, in the electric guitar amplifiers. We lost our biggest customers. Who cares? And so they literally pulled out of the market. And with the eyes of today, this was an incredible mistake, because pulling out of the rock and roll market in 1965 means 2 years before Hendrix, 2 years before Led Zeppelin, and, everybody else. So basically, they left the entire market open basically for the benefit of Celestion, which, with all merit, has been and still is the largest supplier of loudspeakers to the industry of the electric guitar. So Jensen was out of the business until the beginning of the 2000. That's when we in Italy were the Jensen distributors for the consumer audio products, the company I was working with at the time. And we explained to the Jensen management the potential of returning the brand into its original market, which was the musical instrument amplifiers. And they said, well, if you want to try, do it. But unfortunately, since the company had changed hands so many times throughout these 35 years, there was no technical archive available. There was no technical information, no history, no specification. There was nothing. So in order to do this, we had, and that was really, really fun for a guitar player like me. It was incredibly fun because we spent 2 or 3 years shopping vintage amps with, no money limits, basically. So we bought everything we could buy, amplifiers or simple loudspeakers, out of the cabinets. And I don't remember how many we bought, but probably it's close to 100 pieces. And then obviously we sold a lot of them. Some we kept. And I used also my personal amplifier collection as one of the benchmarks for the factory. So what we did was a complete reverse engineering process, starting from the vintage loudspeaker and then trying to understand who was the supplier for the membrane, who was the supplier for the voice coil, how the voice coil was wound, who was making them. And we have been lucky because we found some very old former Jensen employees, who maybe had a box with some sheets and data and technical information, maybe, in a carton box in the basement. So we actually went after these former Jensen employees, trying to gather as much information as we possibly could. And in the NAMM, Winter NAMM 2000, we had our first booth at the NAMM show. And it was strange because, nobody has seen Jensen as a company since 35 years. And we were Italians. So people was walking at our booth and said, "Who are you? You don't belong to this. Tell us the story. This is weird." And, some people didn't believe in us. Some people did believe. And we are extremely grateful to companies like Fender, Victoria, and Mesa Boogie, who were among the firsts, believing in the quality of the job we have done in reproducing, reissuing the speakers, the vintage speakers, as they were built 20, 30, 50 years before. So, and when you are opened by Fender as a supplier, then the whole industry, takes notice. So we kind of started from there. So in terms of sound, our heritage is mostly related to the vintage Fender heritage, the tweed era, the brown and blonde era, and the blackface era. Those are the two families, the Alnico vintage and the ceramic vintage, that has set Jensen back into the market.
Recrear modelos clásicos usando materiales modernos no debe ser fácil. ¿Cuál fue la mayor dificultad en este proceso?
Right. So, yes, it has been a challenge. Really, the biggest challenge was understanding why a guitar speaker is different from a hi-fi speaker or a pro audio speaker. If you speak with an engineer who designs pro audio speakers and you show him the specification of a guitar speaker, he will tell you this is a wrong speaker. Because a pro audio speaker or a hi-fi speaker are designed to be as linear as possible and to have as the least possible amount of distortion, which are two things that mean nothing in the electric guitar world. A speaker built like that is great for pro, is great for bass, is exceptional for hi-fi or studio monitor, but it's completely useless for an electric guitar amplifier. It just sounds bad. It doesn't have the sound that we are looking for. So the first obstacle, the first task was to understand this difference. And then, of course, recreating the magnets, recreating the voice coils wasn't particularly complex. That is, let's say, for a company that makes loudspeakers as their only business, as SICA is, that's not an issue. The issue was finding the original supplier of the cone membrane, which is the highest and biggest influence in terms of tone for an electric guitar speaker. So we had to find out who were the suppliers at the time. Many of them are still in business. So it was possible for us to say, okay, we want this membrane, this membrane, this membrane as built 50 years ago with the same pulp composition, the same materials, and the same design. And by design, I mean two things. One is the ribs, the corrugation pattern that are on the membrane, and the other one is with the same suspensions, because a guitar speaker doesn't have a traditional suspension, which usually is made by treated cloth or by rubber. An electric guitar speaker has the paper extends to the surrounds, and then it's corrugated to give, the spring effect, but basically has no suspension. So to convince the suppliers to print those membranes exactly as they were printing those membranes 50 years ago. One thing that was impossible to do, and that's probably the biggest difference between the original Jensen speakers and the current Jensen speakers made by us, by SICA Altoparlanti, is the voice coil former. You know what the former is? The voice coil basically is some windings, like a pickup, usually made of copper, and they are wound around a cylinder that originally was made of paper. Like when you run out of toilet paper in the bathroom, yeah, that kind of thing.
Okay.
But originally they were made of paper. The problem with paper is that it's very fragile. It can be easily deformed. It's not very resistant to the heat. So the same speaker with a paper former will take probably half of the power if you change the former to a more modern material. So we investigated and we experimented a lot, and we found contemporary materials you can actually use in a modern manufacturing process that sounded like paper but have a much higher structural strength in order to take twice the power of the originals, because the original Jensen speakers were fragile. A P10R was probably 10 to 12 watts maximum before blowing out. Just by changing the former, the power handling has doubled. A P10R currently has 25 watts.
Okay.
So the reissues are much more reliable, much more consistent one from the other. They all sound the same and take twice the power. So they fit better with today's amplifier technology, because today's amplifier are typically way more powerful than the original tweed amps in the 50s. They were like 10, 12, 15, 25 watts maximum, unless the high power tweed twin, which is nearly 80 watts. But nearly 80 watts with two 12 inches that maybe could take 25 watts each. They were blowing speakers big time. Now the same speaker is 50 watt, so it doesn't blow out. So these were the key tasks. And the other task was, how should we voice the speaker? Should we voice the speaker as if this speaker has been playing for 50 years? Or should we voice the speaker as it was voiced when it was brand new from the factory?
Okay.
That's a big difference. So we spoke with our customers, and Fender said, no way, we want the speaker as they were made 50 years ago. Forget about the aging, because the aging of a speaker depends incredibly on the climatic conditions. A speaker that has always been played in a very dry environment will age in a certain way. A speaker that has been played maybe really loud in a blues club in New Orleans with smoke, dust, flood, moisture will age in a very different way. So we decided in agreement with our customers to make the speaker unaged, as if they were straight out of the production line 50 years ago. So that was, this is a kind of a philosophical decision. And many customers complained that the speaker is a little bit too bright, a little bit too hard. Some customers, those who don't understand. The simple answer is give time to the speaker to break in, to mature. Play the speaker for maybe 30 to 50 hours, and the speaker will reach the tone that it has been designed for. Let me show you one thing. Let's take a magazine, right? Paper. A magazine that has never been opened, when you open, you see it doesn't go flat because the paper has some sort of resistance, because it has been staying in this position for many, many months. But if you open the magazine and you stretch it, you see, now it's flat because I forced it to go in a certain position. And with the speaker is exactly the same thing. The suspension, the spider has been resting in a certain position for maybe months or weeks into the box. Then when you put it into the amplifier and you start playing music with it, the speaker moves. But in order to get all the flexibility that it has been designed, it will take some time. So speaker break-in is not a myth, it's physics. Every speaker will mature and will get better between 30 to 50 to maybe 100 hours of playing at, a decent, reasonable level. Bedroom level, you won't change much. But, playing the amplifier with your friends in a band at rehearsals, that will do a lot. Or maybe, just play some music through the amp and let it move. If you don't have time to play yourself, don't use sine sweeps or white noise or this kind of thing. It's if you do it too much, it can be dangerous to the speaker. Just play some music, because music is not a fixed amplitude signal. Music is made of transients, silence, transient, silence. So it gives the speaker time to recover from the heat of, a continuous signal will give. So just play and let the speaker mature and you will be happy.
Hasta acá llega la primer parte de esta increíble entrevista con Ignazio de Jensen Speakers. Estén atentos porque se vienen más capítulos hablando de la historia de Jensen, de tecnología y de audio. Nos vemos la próxima.